It is absolutely fantastic to be joined in the studio by the Reverend George Penk. George, kia ora.
Hello, Andrew. Nice to see your face.
Now, honestly, this is what we used to do, except earlier in the day, co-hosting a show together. We've had conversations over the years and phone conversations and on air and everything. But you and me back in the studio together again, this could be the beginning of a beautiful thing, George.
Well, don't believe the rumours. There was no actual, there was no restraining order.
No.
I didn't have a problem with seeing you face to face, but it's very nice to be back here, seeing you in person.
And hey, been very much enjoying the content of the 7-Minute Sermon and Bible Boost as well. I was saying to you off air that I've now joined Team Penk, as it were. At the beginning of summer, I was listening to Bible Boost as it went out each day, and then I thought, I'm going to miss doing this when I'm not on air at this part of the day. And then I thought, well, I could always subscribe, couldn't I?
There's an idea.
So signed up to not just Bible Boost, but of course 7-Minute Sermon as well. Life-changing, George. It's actually really cool. And even an old guy like me can figure out how to make the podcast thing work. Very much been enjoying both Bible Boost and 7-Minute Sermon. Thanks for all you do, man.
Well, thank you, and I'll give you that $20 later, all right? Thanks for the plug.
It is really good indeed. And look, some people starting the year, and we're going to get into the content of this week's edition of 7-Minute Sermon, the key to flourishing. And hey, as some people start the year, that's what's going through their mind. Okay, 2025. How can I make it a better year? How can I be firing on all cylinders? How can I be flourishing? Some people may be starting the new year, but you've just been going right through summer, actually, haven't you? The 7-Minute Sermon hasn't skipped a beat.
Well, this is true, yeah. It has continued on, and perhaps a good topic though to be addressing as many of us do really get back into the new year proper, and normal routines are well and truly underway. Thrive in 25, as they say on LinkedIn. I'm not sure you wanted to hear that, but maybe it's a good start.
Well, I'd rather hear it from you than sign up for LinkedIn. Come on, one step at a time. But what does it look like? What does it look like to thrive in 25? I suppose through a spiritual framework.
Yeah, so this is really what I'm addressing in this week's sermon, and particularly looking at a brief passage of scripture from the book of Psalms. In fact, right at the very start, Psalm 1, verses 1 to 3. And in terms of the psalm, what I like about it, it has some great ideas in it itself, but it also sort of sets the tone for the whole collection of psalms. So the 150 psalms in the Psalter, the following 149 of them, you can sort of see within the context of this psalm, where it talks about, blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord.
I love that metaphor, I suppose, and the way that it sets it up. It's like the opening monologue of the Psalms, the intro piece for that. And I also love that in the first 3 verses, it gives, okay, you've got options, guys. You can be on team 1, or you can be in the secondary team, and then basically comes to a conclusion. Don't be like these guys. Yeah. Actually have your source of life somewhere else.
Well, it's interesting that it talks about the way of sinners, because the way in sort of biblical speak, it's sort of shorthand, isn't it, for a whole way of life, and the way that somebody lives their life and the way that they relate to God or don't relate to God, perhaps. And the psalmist here, who we think was David, the psalmist is making very clear contrast. In these first 3 verses, he says, this is the way of the blessed person, the person who God is pleased with. This is the way of the righteous. And then in those next verses, he goes on to make the contrast. And spoiler alert, but things don't work out so well for that person. So there's this very, very almost sort of black and white. Yeah. Right at the start of the book of Psalms, which we get so much wisdom from throughout those 150 poems and songs in the Old Testament. But right at the start, it's setting the tone, saying, this is the way. I'd recommend you choose this one.
This is the way, walk ye in it, as it were. Fish or cut bait. What's it going to be, guys? Are you with me or against me in some ways?
Fish or cut bait. Is that the new Urquhart version?
No, that's more of a New Testament thing. I get that with the fishermen, etc. But there we go. The other thing that I really love about these first 3 verses is the way that there's sort of a downward path to this journey. If you could read those verses again, George, I haven't memorized them yet, but what's the version you've got there?
Okay, so I've got from the NIV. It says, "Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord."
And see, the thing there, it goes from walking to standing,
Yes,
to sitting. That walking is, okay, you can walk past something, but then when you stop and then when you focus, you become more a part of that team. But then when you're sitting down and being in company with these people, and also it's kind of like a bit of a downward spiral that actually what we spend time on, what gets our attention, what we focus on, it's not just something that we might see on a billboard. No, this is something which we're looking up on Google. This is what we're deciding to do with our time on social media, that we're actually connecting with a group of people. We're saying, hey, this is my tribe, which is very different than the alternative that the psalmist offers.
Yeah, I think that's a really good observation you make. There's a progression there, isn't there?
Or the opposite of a progression, a degression.
Well, this is true. Because there's not much progress, really. But it's also quite a sort of biblical idea in other places in the scriptures. For example, in Proverbs, do not set foot on the path of the wicked or walk in the way of evildoers. Avoid it, do not travel on it, turn from it and go your own way.
Wow.
So it's, again, it's very, very clear, isn't it? This way or that way.
And the other cool metaphor, I think, from Psalm 1 is we should be like trees.
Yeah.
Be like the trees. I mean, this is almost getting a bit Dr. Seuss. This is almost sort of like I speak for the trees, but no, that we should be like trees rather than being like those people that sit around with the mockers, right?
Yeah, and I think this image of a tree by a stream is it's quite powerful actually, because it's about strength, it's about stability, and it's about vitality. Really, it's about life and it's about flourishing. Interestingly, actually, when I was sort of researching this one, I came across something that St. Augustine wrote about Psalm 1. And he interpreted the blessed person as being nourished by the Spirit. Like he said, just like the streams of water nourish and give life to this tree so that it thrives and so that it has life, the Holy Spirit is quenching our thirst and allowing us to display good fruit, which is very New Testament idea, isn't it? Fruit of the Spirit. Exactly,
fruits of the Spirit. And of course, the trees aren't walking. The trees are locked in.
This is not talking.
They're not. Exactly. They're not strolling along the water. They are locked in. And to their source, which is, of course, the water, and in St. Augustine's example, the Spirit of God. Now, hey, fantastic deep stuff, and we're going to unpack that more in just a moment with this week's edition of the 7-Minute Sermon. If people like me are going, yeah, podcast would be a good idea, I just haven't figured out how to do that yet, like I was just a few weeks ago, George, how do they take that step? How do they connect with something which will build their spirit?
Couple of different ways to do it. The first is to go to the Rhema website, rhema.co.nz. You can find all the episodes there under the shows tab at the top of the page. Also, quite a few of them on the homepage.
Yep.
So that's rhema.co.nz. Or if you go to any podcast platform, so we're talking apps like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, any of the places where you can find podcasts, you can find 7-Minute Sermon there. If you search 7-Minute Sermon, you can use either the word 7 with the letters or the number 7. Both seem to work. Search 7-Minute Sermon. You'll see it there. If you click subscribe or follow in that podcast app, you'll get yourself a new episode every week.
That is super good. And hey, if somebody like me can do it, and I didn't even get help from a younger person, I did it all myself, then you can as well. Do check it out, George. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.